Welcome into Locked On Horned Frogs. TCU added another big piece to their 2023 football class on Monday. We'll talk about that next. This is Locked On Horned Frogs.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is your team every day. Some recruiting news to start today's proceedings. So the Frogs landed a commit for their 2023 class on Monday morning. Safety Warren Roberson from Red Oak, Texas. He committed to TCU. Roberson is a four-star safety. He stands at 6 feet tall, 180 pounds. Now, it's interesting. Jeremy Clark said this on Monday, and I won't reveal all his details. He has some good write-ups on Horned Frog Blitz if you want to go to that website. But one thing he did mention was that Robertson he wasn't a USC commit, but he was a pretty heavy USC lean. Like Lincoln Riley and that staff had done a good job of developing a relationship. Kind of seemed like that was the way it was going. But through the course of this football season, TCU has been able to land him and get him committed to the Frogs on Monday. So it's been kind of slow on the recruiting front. They had a really good offseason. And, of course, as the season started to pick up steam, they haven't had as much as far as commits go. But they've been working really hard on these visits, getting guys to come in. And I think that, the biggest thing that's one of the biggest things that's come from this 8-0 start and this great season has been some of these fantastic home environments like Oklahoma State, like Kansas State, like I hope Texas Tech is on Saturday at 11 a.m. They've had recruits there, and they've had high school kids see, like, okay, this team is winning. They're playing really well in year one under Sonny Dykes, and you can come play at a place with great facilities. You can come play at a place that when the team's doing well and they're successful will sell out and pack the house and create an incredible atmosphere to perform in. So Robertson joins the fold. He's a track guy as well, really athletic. Had a really impressive offer list. Actually had an offer from Alabama, Arkansas, some other SEC schools. But anytime, the Crimson Tide notice what you're doing, especially on the defensive side of the ball, that means you can play. Another DFW kid, which is something that Sonny Dykes and his staff have put a huge emphasis on, is getting those young men from Dallas. Is one of the reasons that he came over from SMU, because he did such a good job of that, both in the high school ranks and getting guys on the transfer portal to come to the Hilltop to play for him there. So a huge get, some really good momentum. They now have 20 commits for this class, and I think they've done a really good job they have, really high consensus four-star players, players like Cordell Russell, the wide receiver from North Mesquite. Robertson now joins that fold. The safety from Red Oak, Avion Carter, defensive lineman from Amarillo Tascosa, Cameron Cook, the running back from Round Rock, Stony Point. And then they just have a number of players that I think they've evaluated really well. Kind of high upside three-star players like Max Carroll, the athlete from Memphis, Lafayette Caraway, the tight end from Sam Houston, Javon Wilcox, the Lake Belton safety. So they've done a really good job of sort of mixing and matching and making this class work. So I like what they're doing in that front. From a rankings perspective, they now sit at 23rd overall in the nation, and they're the third highest ranked class in the Big 12 currently for 2023. And, honestly, the recruiting didn't really drop off a whole lot as far as the types of players they were getting. Even towards the end of the Gary Patterson era, they were still recruiting at a pretty high level. I think they've streamlined things now. They have some staff members like Brian Carrington, like Aaron Hodges, who are committed to basically, doing that full time in a way that I don't think the previous staff was. But they've carried on this momentum of finding talent, especially in the DFW area, and a few names to watch over the next few weeks. And we're really close. We're like a month and a half away from signing day now, early signing day. So it's coming up quick. But Mikael Harrison Pilot is a player in Temple And he's listed as an athlete, safety. I think TCU is looking at him as a wide receiver, but he's played a little bit of everything. He played quarterback at Temple at times. He's been a wide receiver. He's been in the secondary. So he plays both ways. And he's got a lot of attention from Cal, from Houston, but they've been recruiting him hard. I know he's been on campus a few times in the last few weeks. So that's a player that they're looking to add. And Pilot's an impressive guy. And, Temple, they have a pretty good connection. Quentin Johnston played his high school ball in Temple. Jared Wiley, the Texas transfer, also originally from Temple, Texas. So they have a few guys on the roster who can obviously, relate to him in that way and talk him up. But Pilot's a player that I think they're after pretty hard right now. And then Marcus Deal, the defensive lineman from Naaman Forest, he's a 4-star player. And he's down to Georgia, TCU, Oklahoma's in the mix as well. So if they could pull that off, that would be a pretty impressive end to what's been a super impressive class so far. And kind of the one glaring thing that they don't have at the moment from a high school perspective is quarterback. So I'm not sure how they address that. I don't know if they're going to get a late QB ad in this cycle or if they'll go more the transfer portal route. But that's just sort of the one roster area they haven't addressed. But they've done a good job in the trenches, in the secondary, obviously now adding Robinson from Red Oak. And, yeah, exciting times in the recruiting front, and TCU continuing to kind of capitalize on the momentum from what's been a really great season for this team so far. So that is your latest update. Warren Roberson, the Red Oak safety, he commits to TCU after, kind of flirting with USC through the process and some others, but lands with the Frogs as we are getting closer to early signing day coming up in December. When we come back, I want to talk about a 1-year anniversary that happened yesterday, and then we got college football playoff rankings tonight. It's been a while since we've had to care about that, right? Like since TCU was in the mix in that discussion, but it's coming this evening on ESPN. So I'm curious to see where the Frogs end up and kind of where they're set up moving forward. Before we do that, though, I do want to mention one of our great sponsors, Nissan. So Nissan's partnered with the Locked On Network to create a great segment, Thrilling Moments. So we highlight the most exciting play of the week. And I had a hard time on this one because, there were plays in the game that obviously were huge in deciding it. But a lot of the big plays on offense happened in the first half. I ended up landing on our Nissan Thrilling Moment for this week being that pass from Max Duggan to Savion Williams on 4th and 1 that sealed the game. That little fade pattern, it was a free play. They got West Virginia jump off sides on the hard count, and then great recognition by both Duggan and Williams to just say, okay, let's just throw this ball up and see what happens. And Williams went up and got the football and came down with it and scored the touchdown and put that game to bed. 41-31. Frogs win. That was your Nissan Thrilling Moment. This segment's been inspired by the thrilling new designs featured across Nissan's new line of vehicles. Pursue what thrills you in an all-new Frontier, Armada, or Pathfinder, and you can do that today. So welcome back to Locked On Horned Frogs. I am your host, Steven Simcox, and I thought about this yesterday. On Monday, it was the 1-year anniversary of Gary Patterson and TCU parting ways. And so I remember it was a Sunday afternoon, and I heard some rumblings, but I didn't have anything concrete to go off of. And I was trick-or-treating with my family, and we're walking around this neighborhood with my kids. And my phone just starts going off. I get these text messages. It's kind of vague text messages. And I think it was my pal Matt Jennings who was on the show. He texted me and was like, oh my gosh, they did it. And then I saw the news. And so it's been a strange few years for TCU football. And that K-State game last year was just such a beatdown. And you could just tell the team seemed lost. They seemed uninspired. And there was so much uncertainty around what was going to come next, right? Like, didn't really know what direction they were going to go. I thought TCU was a super attractive job, but it'd been a long time since anyone had, taken over. It'd been a long time since there was any sort of coaching search. in football. And so what actually was the ceiling for this program? And I remember when Sonny Dykes' name started coming up, I thought that made sense. And I think I've said this before, but when they hired him, I had come to terms with it. I was like, okay, yeah, this has been out there for a long time. It makes sense. I was somewhat underwhelmed because I thought like Sonny was a guy that could get them to a bowl game quickly, could turn things around, get that offense going. I didn't think he could do what he's done. So I have to give it up to him. First, I'll say I was wrong, right? Like I was just blatantly wrong about how good this team could be and how quickly they could turn things around. And it's been rocky at times, but the bottom line is a team last year that was 5-7 is 8-0, have a chance at home to go 9-0 against Texas Tech. And I don't know what happens after the last third of the season, or this last third of the season. I mean, they have some tough games, right? Like Tech at home is tricky. Texas on the road and Baylor on the road are going to be tough. Iowa State has really good defense. But I know TCU is really good, and I know they've handled every challenge so far with a lot of maturity. They've approached games really well. They've made the plays they've had to make to win, and I've just been really blown away by how quickly they have gotten up off the mat and gotten this thing going. It's been a completely different team. Like games, the last few years they would lose close games where the chips were kind of down. It looked like they were out. They've come back and found ways to win. Down 17 to Oklahoma State, down 18 to Kansas State. Just chipped away and found a way to get victories. On the road against West Virginia when things got tight last week or on Saturday. I guess it wasn't last week. They stepped up and made the plays they had to make. And so it's been a full year since the regime change, I guess, kind of started. And obviously Coach Dykes didn't get hired until a couple months later. But what a job the staff has done in year one, just getting this team to believe, getting them to buy in and find a way to win and just get better. It's been fun to watch. I've been super impressed with how they've handled their business and gone about it. And I'm excited to see, the new heights that he can take this to. Again, it's like the present looks really good. The future looks bright. You have a good recruiting class coming in. I think this staff is going to work really hard in the transfer portal to address some needs this offseason. So the guy that has the keys knows what he's doing. Like the program's in good hands. I just want to reflect for a minute on the job they've done here in year one. And we'll preview that Tech game as the week goes on because it should be an interesting one. Tech coming off that blowout loss to Baylor week before they blew out West Virginia. So they've kind of been Jekyll and Hyde. Don't really know what to expect from them from week to week. We are getting our first set of college football playoff rankings tonight. And looking at the AP Top 25, Georgia's at 1, Tennessee and Ohio State tied for second, Michigan at number 4, Clemson at 5, Alabama at 6, TCU at 7. So where do the Frogs land? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they end up at 7. I am interested to see how they stack up against one-loss Alabama. I think the committee, I wouldn't be shocked if they obviously gave the nod to Alabama, but TCU has an impressive resume. Like they're undefeated and they haven't beaten a bunch of scrubs. They've had some ranked wins. Now, some of those ranked wins don't look as good as they did earlier in the season. Oklahoma is obviously not nearly as good as we thought going into the preseason. Kansas has sort of faded weeks, but K-State is legit. I mean, they just waxed Oklahoma State on Saturday. Oh, yeah, a lot of people were talking about how lucky TCU was to face Will Howard. Well, I guess Will Howard's a pretty good quarterback because he tore up Oklahoma State on Saturday. I think Oklahoma State's dealing with some injury issues right now, and they didn't look good against the Wildcats, but they beat Texas the week after that tough loss to TCU. I think Mike Gundy's an underrated coach. That's a good program. I mean, TCU has knocked off an impressive number of opponents. They've stayed undefeated. They're the only undefeated team in the Big 12. I hope the committee gives them some respect and some admiration tonight, but we'll see where they end up in that first set of playoff rankings. And, of course, as you know, it's also a week-to-week thing. As TCU fans know all too well, unfortunately, just because you're ranked, number 6, number 5, or number 3, one week doesn't mean you will be the next week. And I don't want to bring up any more bad memories than that. But we'll end on a positive note. They're back in the mix in the college football playoff rankings, and that's a really cool thing to talk about. This has been Locked On Horned Frogs. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'll talk to you tomorrow. It's your team every day.